The following video is one in a series on spiritual resilience training, a non-religious view of personal values and their dynamics with others. The contents reflect a variety of principles and practices of systems theory and relational counseling for team building and family resilience. Although the series is intended to support Army Corps values, each video also encourages the viewer to reflect on their current prominent values in specific situations and to consider what values may be more appropriate to means and results that are honorable and helpful with others. Chaplain Dillard initiates creating and posting these videos. Their contents and YouTube's linked videos do not necessarily reflect specific beliefs, practices, requirements, or endorsements of the Department of Defense, its subordinate organizations, or other groups with which Chaplain Dillard is affiliated. Welcome back. We are starting now to drill down into some specifics of each generation, one generation at a time. But before we do that, let me emphasize a couple things. One, if you have not seen the two-part introduction that does a broad sweep and compares 5 generations to each other, I would encourage you to watch that. We won't duplicate that here, and I think that is foundational to understanding what we're trying to accomplish. Secondly, just a reminder that I'm not trying to pigeonhole any individual and say that because they're from this generation, this is who they are, or that this is who they should be. These are some broad observations about national and world events that shaped people in their formative years growing up, and the intent is for us to understand each other better because we tend to see each other through our own lens, through our worldview. We are concluding this series on working in multi-generational teams with a look at what I'm calling the Revolutionaries, the next generation, those born at the turn of the millennia up through about 2020. Now, at the taping of this video, we're toward the end of 2016, but I have experienced enough of this generation, in my opinion, and maybe you have too, through my teenagers who were born in 99 and 2001, and their friends and friends of their friends, and we've lived in a couple of different countries and several different states over the last several years, but more importantly than personal experience, watching some of the national events that have happened in the last almost 20 years that you're probably familiar with, and many of the international events that have been shaping influences on the folks who are growing up during that time frame from the turn of the millennia up to about 2020. So, as I said in the introduction a few weeks ago, I'm not a prophet, I'm not the son of a prophet, but I think these are some reasonable deductions we can make about the upcoming generation and how they might respond in the workforce, and some perspectives that are important for us to take into consideration in working with them in multi-generational teams. And this will be the last one I'll brief, because the next will be a generation that will come into the workforce probably long after I'm gone from this earth. So let's go ahead and dive in and take a look. If you remember, the revolutionaries are those who, when individualized culture said, think again, they did. The bottom line up front for them is that they are shifting from defined realities to loosing realities. They have been raised in paradigm shifts. For example, when our highest leaders said that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, others came forward and questioned subject matter experts and other leaders and said, no, there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. They have seen religion move from something that is to propagate peace to something that propagates terror. And yes, that has been a reality for millennia in parts of the world, but it's never been the daily experience of Americans. They have seen a shift from national focus to a global focus. Our first minority president, the requirement of national health care for all individuals, self-identification, defining your own gender, defining your own family and what that makeup is, defining your own race, and even the question of what it means to be a person. The recession and the struggles of the European Union, all of these have been paradigm shifts for the revolutionary. So what has been defined reality in their mind, or what was taught to them as reality, is very much being questioned, and not just questioned, changed. Its very definitions are being changed. And that is thematic for the revolutionaries, and really needs to give us some insight into those shaping influences and why they will have the perspective that they will. Let's look at some more specifics. The revolutionaries will be very innovative, as I mentioned in the introduction. And as far as work goals go, they really don't have a priority on the concept of career. They have seen people who are work-focused and money-focused and prestige-focused, and it has been pejorative for them. It's been a stigma, something that they are not necessarily interested in, pursuing career for career's sake. So, of course, they need to feed themselves. Of course, they want to do well. They want to take pride in what they do, but their focus is not on career. So, as mobile as the millennials have been, the revolutionaries could be even more mobile. Institutions for the revolutionaries are archaic. If you remember, the millennials saw that they were morphing, but the revolutionaries, for them, they're not morphing fast enough. Their institutions are old dinosaurs that are not catching up with the culture that they want to change as fast as they want to change it. And there are many reasons for that, especially in a democracy where we elect our officials into office, whether that's in the government or in the school system or any other types of institutions you might name. We have to work our way up the promotion chain to achieve a job, or we elect our officials, and so that takes time to establish those institutions. It will take time for them to morph into whatever they become. But they're not changing fast enough for the revolutionaries, who have seen corruption in a lot of the institutions, who have heard daily on the news, who have seen their parents, most of whom were baby boomers, working themselves to death, trying to be the best they can be, putting in long hours. They've seen the detrimental effects, both in corruption at the institutional level, both in the home life, and they want the institutions to change even faster than they're changing. Rewards. If you want to reward a revolutionary, validate them. When I say validate them, I mean listen to their concerns, listen to their values, and at every point that you can agree, validate that you understand that, if you truly do. If you don't, listen more until you do understand it, and connect with them on their individual concerns, because they're passionate. And we're going to get to this a little bit later, they're not just individualistic. They want to group with like-minded people because they've seen the effects and the power of working in mass with people who are like-minded. So to validate their concerns individually is to also validate the social concerns that they have, which is much more important to them than work goals. Doesn't mean that they will not be good workers, doesn't mean that they can't become future leaders, but for them, work is not the focus. Social influence is more the focus. And also how the new social influence is being reflected and worked on at work. One of the reasons that I've put the previous generations up on this slide is I want you to see the progress or the shift in many of these areas, and one of these is the career focus. In the past, the different generations have focused on the venue of the career. I want to stay with this corporation or this business or whatever for 40 years, said the silent generation or the greatest generation. I want to be stellar in this job field, said the baby boomers. I'm willing to use my skill set and move around, said the Gen Xers and the millennials. But for the revolutionaries, the focus is not out there. The focus is on the individual. I want you and I expect you to keep me and to care for me, meaning to develop me, to promote me, to encourage me. And there are many reasons for that. And I don't know how you'll hear that, but it makes complete sense thinking about how they grew up. They have seen, again, a lot of the corruption in some of the institutions and leaders, at least on the national news. They've seen the fragility of the family. They've seen lots of ways that people said, I'm going to take care of you, and they didn't. So they're very much wanting, expecting, even demanding, I expect you at work not only to keep me, but to develop me and care for me. Now, it's not a threat. Some of that is just a natural desire and need to be validated, nurtured, and brought up and developed. And we're going to have to take that perspective, or at least take that into consideration, that the shift has changed It's a complete paradigm shift for them. And given the fact that either Gen Xers or millennials will be the first-line supervisors of the revolutionaries, they're going to get some of that, but they may perceive the revolutionaries as impatient. They may perceive them as immature. It would probably be better to perceive them as passionate, that they have a passionate desire for social justice, for individual respect and validation, and they're going to be aggressive to see that accomplished at work, especially if it's not happening at home or hasn't happened at home. Feedback. Here's another paradigm shift. The revolutionary says, I've got some feedback for you. In the past, we've often looked at it, or I've looked at it in the series, from the perspective of feedback from the supervisor, from the leader. But the revolutionary, because there's been a lot of grassroots movements, leadership from the bottom up, that's going to carry over into work as well, and they're going to have lots of input about how to make the job environment better, about how to make their individual work better, about how the leaders could lead better. As far as work and family goes, revolutionaries will be comparing the two. If you watch or look back and think about what we've seen in the news, what's happened in the world, in our nation over the last couple of decades, you can see that folks have been fairly quick to change alliances between one social group and another, depending on how they perceive the integrity of that group, the leaders, whether they're going to follow through and make good on their promises, the immediate results. Do things actually get changed the way they said they were going to change them? And so, but that's one reason they're willing to change alliances, to put more emphasis into work or to put more emphasis into family, because they've seen that people aren't always who they say they are. One of the other things that plays into that is, depending on the individual family, obviously, the revolutionaries may have grown up into a very tight family because they were raised by baby boomers, possibly by millennials, who were very much go-getters. And if they were also focused on their families, the parents as baby boomers or millennials, then they might themselves very much value family. On the other hand, if those baby boomers or millennials as their parents were out the door and focused on their own careers and developing themselves and being more individually focused on themselves, that being the parents, then the revolutionaries may not value family at all, and they're kind of comparing where should I put my eggs in which basket. For the workplace, the revolutionaries are going to want diversity and boldness. This is a extension or a carryover or a continuation from the millennials, a great emphasis on diversity of ethnic groups, of social interest, a really blended group, but they want to be more bold, and they want others to be more bold as well. They have seen the goodness, or at least the impact of being bold, that change can be had. And so they're not as likely to sit behind the desk or whatever their job is and to work quietly, or to have their passions outside of work and to be fairly to themselves at work. They're going to carry their passion wherever they are. So they want diversity, but they want to be bold as well. In terms of leadership style, they want somebody who's passionate, and they themselves want to be passionate. That's part of the boldness there. They are not as interested in somebody who has subject matter expertise, because they can look back in their life at people who knew the right things to do, or who had experience in a job or with a title or other skills, but their heart was something entirely different. They weren't necessarily a person of integrity, or for them it was just a job, and they didn't follow through on some of the promises and some of the campaign pledges. Now I'm using some political jargon, but in the commercial world as well, or in the social world, they really want somebody who believes in what they're doing, who is expressive, and they want to be that way themselves. It's coming back to a little more personality-based. Communication for the revolutionaries is going to be a little, here I am, and a little more aggressive too, as opposed to previous generations who are responding to the supervisor. They're going to be a little more initiating with the supervisor. Some of that is a natural outworking of technology. Technology enables immediate communication. Tweeting and Facebooking and FaceTiming and all the other venues of social media have ingrained in them that because immediate communication is possible, we should have immediate communication. They're going to bring that attitudes into work. There can be a lot of goodness in that. That means that they want to hear quickly, they want to speak quickly, they want to get work done quickly. So we might be inclined to say, whoa, what are you doing showing up at my office? You can just send me an email, make an appointment. That would be one way to perceive it, is kind of standoffish and a little bit put off by their aggressive attitude. On the other hand, we could see it as very much a positive, that they're ready to get things done and they're taking some initiative in that communication. If you want to motivate a revolutionary, listen to their perspective and follow up with action. Now, obviously, it's not going to be possible to act on everything that they tell us, nor would it be appropriate for us to act on everything that any individual wants. But they are very much wanting leaders to be personally involved with them, and they want to see that their words are not just falling on deaf ears. The mentor type desired by revolutionary, they're going to have the attitude of more, I will choose my own mentor for my own goals. Again, their focus is not so much on career and work as it is their social interest for justice, for equality, for individual rights. And if they see somebody who is interested in them as a person, they are more likely to engage that person to mentor them. It might not look like a traditional mentor. It may or may not be a first-line supervisor or anybody in their work chain. But they're going to be more selective. They're going to be more distrusting of traditional leaders simply because they've experienced so much corruption and so many bad examples growing up, either in their family, who is more focused on their individual careers, or what they've seen in institutions and other official leaders who failed in their eyes. Some resulting values and beliefs. The revolutionaries are innovative and they value inclusion. They question tradition. They value process over product, meaning how it gets done, the relationships, more than just the work itself. And they see work as an option. It's not necessarily a requirement for them. They need or want quick results. They value acceptance and respect. They value grassroots leaders and civil groups' goals. They value minorities' rights, courage, candor, teamwork, and loyalty. Looking back, and if you're about my age, I'm in my early 50s, if you still have teenagers at home, or if you live around others who have kids currently in their late teens or early 20s, these are the revolutionaries. And you can see why they would value these things, because of what they're going through in our nation and in the world. Now let's make some specific recommendations, or these are my recommendations of how we might need to interact with revolutionaries on a multi-generational team. Value their honesty, their concern for justice, and their courage. Hear their passionate statements as their care for others. Continually validate the individual's worth and provide resources, encouragement, and written specific standards and specific statements of reward or discipline. And we need to understand that commitment to relationships and standards will reap big dividends or big costs depending on the revolutionary. Now, let's look at some of that, or think about some of that one at a time. Valuing their honesty, concern for justice, and courage. It could be very easy to hear the passion of a revolutionary as a rebel. After all, isn't a revolutionary a rebel? Well, how did our country start? With a revolution, right? Revolution is not necessarily a bad thing. It's taking a look at the old and saying, I want to be something different, and working with others to make that happen. So we could hear their passion as complaining, or we could hear it as innovation to make something different and better than what they have experienced. We need to hear it and reframe it the second way. So if we're going to work on a multi-generational team with them, we need to understand that they're probably just wanting the work team and the environment and their job and your leadership, if you're the supervisor, to be even better than it is. If they want to quit, they'd quit, right? Because as I said earlier, they really see work as an option. Now, whatever you think about big social programs by the government, our government, especially in the recent past, is growing more and more at caring for people and enabling many not to have to work. So they see work as an option. We've got lots of young adults who are still living with parents or grandparents. We've got lots of young able adults who are not working because they're receiving care from the government. So if they wanted to quit your multi-generational team, they'd quit. If they're voicing the desire for something different and better, it's because they want to stay. It's because they believe in something about that work team. And so that's a positive passion, even though it might be difficult for the leader to hear. A lot of the revolutionaries identify themselves within a particular social group by race or by sexual orientation or by economic status or by a history of family's power or by a political grouping. They see their individual worth within the context, many times, of a marginalized group, the 1%ers versus the 99 percenters, or the black lives or the blue lives, or however you'd want to phrase it. So to validate their individual worth is very important to them, that you don't see them as a number, a cog in the wheel, just a worker. You're the queen bee and they're a worker bee. They need to know that you care about them as a person. And we need to do more than just say that. We need to show that in the ways that we treat them. Providing resources and encouragement is probably a no-brainer, but the specific written standards and the specific rewards and disciplines being expressed to them in writing might not be a no-brainer. Again, depending on who raised them and how, baby boomers or Gen Xers or millennials, they probably had an extremely structured home by type A families. And here's a couple of axioms for you. Rules without relationship will breed rebellion. And so they might have grown up in that type of type A family, and now they just want freedom. That type of person needs very clearly written standards. This is what the job requires of you. If you succeed and do well, these will be the specific rewards. If you don't succeed and you fail and continue to fail, these will be the specific negative consequences. On the other hand, relationship without rules results in chaos. And so they might have been a part of a family that was extremely loose on boundaries, and the kids now, they'll be in the workforce later, the revolutionaries, can kind of do whatever they want. So they also need very specific rules, but they also need relationship and rewards and consequences, but it's got to be spelled out for them, because they probably either got lots of rules with no relationship, and so what is the motivation to really do well, or they got lots of relationship with no rules, there's no structure, and so they need structure. Either way, the relationship and the written standards with spelled out rewards and consequences is going to be important, and then we as leaders will need to be consistent with that. Now, what do I mean by the committed leader, committed to relationships and standards, is either going to reap big dividends or big costs? Well, if the revolutionary sees that and experiences that and cooperates with that, you're going to have an incredibly committed person to you, because they're passionate. Again, they're an innovator. They want to make change. They want to be a part of something big. It's going to be an incredibly good thing to have this person on your work team. On the other hand, either if we don't commit to the relationship, we don't commit to the standards, they're such free floaters, the work team is really going to suffer. Or if you're committed and they want to float regardless of the standards, regardless of rewards or consequences, they kind of think they can still do whatever they want to do, it's going to be hard for you, because you're going to have to discipline that person or fire that person, and they are outspoken. And they will bring an EO complaint, and they will complain to Congress, and they will stand outside with a picket fence. because they have seen that those types of things get attention. So it's going to be tough to be a leader of revolutionaries. It can be incredibly rewarding, but it's going to take much more relational skills from the leaders as opposed to relying on our authority in our title or our subject matter expertise in a field or our experience in that field. It's going to take people skills. So some challenges ahead, but some great opportunities ahead as well. Hope this series has been helpful to you. Again, especially this last part is my own thoughts of what's coming. I think there's some pretty good reasons to expect that a lot of it is going to be the way I've described. But you can take it with a grain of salt, and we'll see. See you next time as we look at a different topic, and I hope to see you then. At the release date of this video, I am stationed with Research, Development, and Engineering Command, RDECOM, at Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. Because the majority of our personnel are in this area, I spend most of my time here. I do, however, travel to our distant units based on command priorities and budget. I place these videos on YouTube for broad visibility to Army personnel and their families, but I hope the videos will be helpful to others too. If you are assigned to RDECOM and want to request specific topics by video, training on site or by VTC, or confidential counseling on site or by secure webcam, you can contact me at jeffrey.d.dillard.mil@mail.mil.